There we are. Right, so we're now recording. Okay.
I thought they were a group.
Well, I was going to say, actually, if you've come along expecting a talk on Wolverhampton Wanderers or something like that, then I apologise right now. So I'm going to mute everybody.
Probably just as well.
I think so. Except there's no way of from here. Okay.
Oh, let's have to mute ourselves.
I know I'm going to do you all one by one.
No. Where are we?
Okay. So it's called the Wanderers because the Wanderers is the translation of the word planets from the Greek. So the word planet is Greek for wanderers because they're the wandering stars. Simple as that, really. And I wasn't inspired and I couldn't think of anything else to call it. So that's what I called it. So we're going to have, I don't know, an hour and a half, couple of hours, however long it takes to talk about all of the things that have been going on in the heavens around 2020. So if you're interested in what's happening but have no understanding or knowledge of the jargon, then just ignore it and allow the things, the descriptions and how you're experiencing it just to come through, and ignore my jargon. But it kind of helps me as much as anybody else to focus on what the hell I'm talking about, because this is all very new to me and I'm learning still. So this is part of my learning process as well. So we're going to talk about all the different players. The players are the planets as far as I'm concerned. I've called them players because you'll see why in a little while. And we've got some main players. And the first player that we're going to talk about is our friend Pluto. Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter are the main planets that we're talking about here. Pluto is the one that's really key to what we're going through at the moment and what is happening. So he's the Lord of the Underworld. He's the secret agent of transformation, if you like. He acts slowly, relentlessly, and he's completely unavoidable. If you try and avoid him, he's just going to make it work. He's going to be the guy that if you say, I really don't like what you're doing, so could you stop it, please? It's, oh, brilliant. Thank you for letting me know. Here's some more of it. And if you then say, okay, that's fine. I understand what you've done so far, but I've really had enough of it now. And he'll say, okay, here's some more of it then. And he'll keep going until he reaches the end and you submit to whatever's happening and whatever's going on. What does he bring us though? He brings us hidden gifts. And he gives us hidden gifts in the shape of endings and subversion of what's happening in the world or in our own lives. All of these things will be happening to a certain extent and a certain degree within our own personal individual lives as well as within the collective. And I'll talk about how that is different later on. So he brings themes of renewal, transformation and evolution. But to get to the renewal, transformation and evolution, we have to go through death, decay and destruction. So he's enforced change. From that enforced change comes regeneration. So that's our friend Pluto. The next one we come across is our friend Saturn. I hope you like the pictures. They're quite cool, I think. But they were. Our friend Saturn, the Lord of Boundaries, I've called him. In ancient astrology, in Hellenistic astrology, he was the last planet in the solar system, the last planet that they knew about. So he was the boundary of everything that we knew. Beyond him was the unknown. And in a sense, the planets beyond Saturn even today represent something that's beyond us. It's transpersonal beyond him. And he represents order and form and discipline and authority. He imposes limits on us. He imposes structure and he represents material achievement. He brings control and discipline. And if he's badly aspect, he can bring insecurity into our lives where we think we're never quite good enough at things. He's serious, he's practical, and he's rigid. And so he represents our work, our responsibilities, and the restrictions we face in our lives. So you can see already that with Pluto and Saturn coming together, we've got two heavyweights coming together representing quite different things. Now, the third fella that's going to come along that we're going to talk about, because all these three planets come together almost, well, all this year anyway, is Jupiter, Zeus, king of the gods, as he was called. He looks a pretty cool dude up there, doesn't he, with his shield and everything else. And he, as opposed to Saturn, whose restriction, he's the desire to expand and to grow things. He takes whatever we've got and says, let's make it bigger, let's make it better, except his idea of better may not be better. Let's have abundance, exaggeration, let's have idealism, let's have faith. Let's be optimistic, let's be generous, and let's practice philosophy about what's happening and what's going on. He represents cosmic law as opposed to material law, which Saturn, by the way, would represent. And he represents our search for meaning and truth and ethical values. But he can be extreme. He knows no boundaries. He doesn't want boundaries. He recognizes boundaries, but he wants to break them down. He's disinterested completely in the details. He just sees the big picture and never mind anything else. And he can get overconfident. So those are the three key players that we're talking about tonight. But there's a supporting cast as well. And these planets are going to come into the frame every now and again. The first one is Uranus. He's the primal sky god of the ancient Greeks. He was originally the consort to the primal earth goddess Gaia. And they had a lovely relationship for a while, and they had children. But Uranus decided that he didn't want the children to become more powerful than him, so he buried them in the earth, beneath the land. And Gaia got a bit pissed off about that. So she went to one of her sons that hadn't been buried, Kronos or Saturn, and said, will you deal with him, please? So Saturn, put bluntly, cut his balls off and threw them in the sea. It was the planet was, when it was discovered, was originally called Herschel, after the astronomer who discovered it. But people didn't like that, and they said, well, surely it should be the name of a Greek god, the same as all the other planets were at that time. So he got named Uranus. But what he represents is actually better represented by another myth. And that's the myth of Prometheus, the awakener. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, and Prometheus in Greek legend and Uranus in the sun, in the stars, represents change, disruption, revolution, unpredictability, sudden unpredictability, rebellion, freedom, originality, inventiveness, independence, inspiration, suddenness, revelation, uniqueness, unorthodoxy, and unconventionality, among other things. Now, Uranus, Prometheus, is going through Taurus at the moment and has been for a little while. So those of you who have Taurus in your chart strongly will probably be recognizing some of these things from time to time and how they aspect your own planets. But Taurus, of course, is all about the earth and all about being earthy. So he's not very happy in Taurus. So there's a kind of dichotomy going on between those two as well. But Prometheus will win, or Uranus will win. So you can expect some changes there at the same time as all these other changes. The next one, the next part player that appears every now and again is our friend Neptune, god of the seas. And Neptune in astrology, he was Poseidon in the Greek world, as you probably know. He actually wasn't terribly nice, but in astrology, he seeks unity with the infinite. He's all about nebulousness and and vagueness and fantasies and dreams and impressionability, idealism, utopianism. But he can also have disorder, disintegration, and chaos going on around him as well. Now, he pops up every now and again. He's not as effective as Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, but we'll talk about Neptune in a little while as well. And there's a couple more. Mars. And oh, wrong Mars. Okay, I'll move on. Mars. God of war. Ares in the Greek myths. He represents the need to initiate, to act, and to assert ourselves. He wants to cut. He needs to do things and cut. He wants action and he wants war. He wants to assert himself. He wants aggression. And he represents how we accomplish things. If without a Mars in our chart, then we would become completely lethargic and not do anything. So we all need to have a representation of Mars. So it's about competition, accomplishment, conquest. If you're Aries, then you'll probably recognize Mars in terms of who you are. But he can be impatient, he can be impulsive, he can certainly be passionate, as well as being courageous, but violent and angry. If you get angry over things, it's probably Mars kicking in with a little bit of Pluto. So you get Mars and Pluto in aspect. Ooh, you know, fireworks. So Mars cuts and severs things. And last of all, we have Venus. They're the only god planets I'm going to be talking about. As you know, there's the Sun, there's the Moon and Mercury. They whiz round so fast, and playing around with what we're doing tonight isn't time. Venus, goddess of love. Aphrodite, the sacred virgin. I hate that picture of her, to be frank, but it represents how she's sometimes seen in astrology. She's about attraction, beauty, harmony, aesthetics, charms, refinement, grace, love, everything we find beauty in and love in. Aphrodite and Venus, of course, wasn't quite this nice. So when her lover fell in love with the mortal Psyche, Venus had Psyche had her lover tie her to the rocks so that she was drowned. So she'd be jealous too. So that's the planets. And now we're going to talk about the signs where these things are going to occur. Most of the time, we're going to be talking about Capricorn for the earlier part of the year, which is a cardinal earth sign. Cardinal means it wants to get things done. It wants to get things started, to get things moving. Earth says it's grounded and real and structured. Capricorn's ruled by Saturn, who we talked about earlier on. So they have a really strong affinity. If you want to think about them, I'm going to use the word houses, which is the houses have a specific name in astrology, but it's kind of nice to think about them as the house. So Capricorn's house is lived in and owned by Saturn. And Capricorn represents material action, structure, organization, social accomplishment. So Capricorn, the Capricorn area part of our chart will be where we are organized, practical, responsible, but it can be controlling, conservative and rigid, and calculating and manipulative and opportunistic. It's the sea goat. So it's a goat and a sea creature at the same time and wants to climb to the heights. It wants to be really successful. I've said feminine in inverted commas because there's this concept in astrology of masculine and feminine, or positive and negative, or yin and yang. And it's really hard to get across. I mean, you could say it's active and passive, but Capricorn isn't ever passive. It's neither is it introverted, but it's a kind of energy around it that's more feminine than the other Saturn-ruled sign, which is Aquarius. Now, Aquarius in modern astrology is ruled by another planet as well, Uranus, that we just talked about, but traditionally it's ruled by Saturn, and I always find it's much more appropriate to have it ruled by Saturn. So, fixed air and masculine, so it's more outward going. Aquarius, fixed sign, it wants to keep things stable, but it's air. And if you've ever found stable air, then it's, you know, air isn't stable. I can see Donna's saying something, but I don't know what she's saying. So we have 2 Saturn signs that are involved with this today. So you can see how important Saturn is. Aquarius stabilizes social and intellectual security. He wants to seek security, but he wants to do it by looking at what are the limits that we are living with at the moment. So where Capricorn wants to enforce the limits that we live in and be successful within those, Aquarius says, okay, let me have a look at these limits. I think we need to change where the limits are. I need to push them out a bit further. Or I don't like the limit around that. I want to change it. I want to alter it. I want to reform that. I want to make things better, more humanitarian for people. Unless it suits Aquarius not to change it, in which case it will say, no, it's going to stay exactly as they are now. So Aquarius is a really interesting sign where it can be really reforming, but it can also be really stuck in its ways if it feels it suits Aquarian ideals. So it can be independent, freedom-loving and unorthodox, but disorganized, fanatical and opinionated. The opinionated can come out in terms of how we change things or how we must keep things the same. It can be antisocial. It's a social sign that's antisocial. So it wants to be social collectively, but it's quite antisocial when it comes to individuals. I know there are one or two people in here now, or I know that have Aquarius very prominent in their chart, and they understand exactly what I'm saying now. They love humanity, but they hate humans. That's Aquarius. And it can be a thoughtless, so it can be detached and aloof sometimes. So let's talk about the cycles of the players that we're talking about. As you can see how epochal where we're going now is. So Pluto takes 248 years to go around the zodiac. Saturn takes 29 to 30 years to travel around the zodiac. Jupiter takes a mere 11.6 years, so around about a sign a year to go through the zodiac. That means the Saturn-Pluto cycle takes around 33 to 38 years before they meet. So we're going back to 1980. I think this time we're going back to 1982. Pluto-Jupiter cycle takes 12.5 years, and Jupiter-Saturn takes 20 years. Now, all of those three cycles are coming together this year, or have already come together this year. And each cycle ends in a different sign. So the last time Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter met in Capricorn was 1894 BCE, which is nearly 4,000 years ago. So you can see this is pretty unique. So we're all stabbing in the dark. Great astrologers have been talking about this for years and years and years. And it's very easy for me now to sit here and say this is what happened, but people were talking about this long before. Just before I open a few things up now, I want to talk about Pan. Pan is the goat. Goat is Capricorn. To me, there's something about Pan here, another Greek god. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's pandemonium going around and there's panic all over the place. And we are recognizing that nature is kind of saying, I've had enough of all of this. I want to do something about it. And Pan is the god of nature. He's the god of the wild wood, the god of the wild. So I just get that feeling that there's something around Pan going on here. There's a great article by this lady, Melanie Reinhardt. Well, it's actually not by him. It's by another fellow, and I can't remember his surname. But it's on that website there. That link will take you to the what he's written, and it's fascinating. Really interesting talk. Let's pause here now. Let me unmute everybody if I can. So has anybody got any questions so far? Anything they want to say? Or is there a stunned silence from everybody?
Nice graphics.
Thank you. Okay. So
He's outside having a ciggy. I'm going to turn him round.
oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
I understand. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
You're giving him too much to think about.
Oh dear. All right. So the transits and so on that we've talked about, they'll have a long-term effect. They're not, even though some of them are already over with in the sense of being exact, because these planets are so slow moving. I'm going to mute everybody again just to make sure that.
Yep, tell us to shut up.
There we go. So these conjunctions, and we're all talking about mostly conjunctions here as well, which make them even more powerful. They're putting into effect global forces that are going to echo through years and years. I was reading an article the other day, I can't remember by who, but they've analysed all of the transits for the whole of the 21st century, and then they grade them in terms of difficulty. And we are right now going through the most difficult part of the entire 21st century. It can only get better from here on in, which is good. Hooray! Yeah. But because they're so long term, even after their immediate effect is over, we still can't be certain of the final outcome. We're we're at the beginning of it, so there's no way we'd be able to really understand what's happened until we come out the other side. But we can still build a personal relationship with these powers to at least help shape our own destiny. And if we've got enough collective vision and we have enough activist dreaming, we can have an impact on collective society as well. And I really believe that. So these are really, truly, genuinely unprecedented global forces at work that will decide not just our fate, but perhaps the fate of nature and the planet itself. So I've gone right back. This is the first slide now of some of the transits that we're going to talk about. I hope you can see them big enough. I don't know how easy they are to see, but can you see that? Can you see that little blue glow? You can. Good. This is where we're talking here. This is what's important here. And this is the first time Pluto enters Capricorn, where we were talking about earlier. And the way this works is Capricorn here. And I've gone ahead, haven't I? That's better. I'm going the wrong way. That's it. Here we are. Oh, bloody hell. There we go. Okay. There we are. Pluto into Capricorn, 26th of January, 2008. So Pluto has just entered Saturn's house, effectively. He's gone into his home and he says, here I am. But Saturn's not at home. Saturn is down here in Virgo. But every planet has to host the planets that are in its own sign, its own home, its own house. So Saturn says, oh, hi, I'm not at home at the moment. What would you like? What can I, can I give you a cup of tea or, a beer or something like that? And Pluto says, well, actually, I'd like a little bit of disintegration and rebellion and discord, please. But he's in there, if you notice, he's in there with that's Venus and that's Jupiter. So they're all in there together, and Saturn says, yeah, okay, I can probably give you a little bit of discord and so on. But then Venus says, well, yeah, but I want a bit of love, I want a bit of beauty. And Jupiter says, hey, let's make it big anyway, whatever it is, just let's make it big. And as you probably remember, around here is the time of when the financial crash began, or at least was the roots of it were discovered, when the subprime mortgage issues in the US started to go global and cause the whole financial crash. With Saturn in Virgo here, wants to know all the details. What's going on? Oh, I need a plan. I need to make sure this is right. Have you got all the facts? Is everything okay? Have you thought about this? And Pluto's going, yeah, I've thought about all of that. So we had an opportunity then with those planets in there to make substantial changes to our society. And we did. But the way we dealt with it was to bail out all the banks and to turn to more conservative governments, conservatives with a small c and a big C, So we decided that the laissez-faire society wasn't giving us any favors. We need some more rules here, Saturn. We need some more rules to sort this out. So we voted in governments across the world, or rebelled against the societies we were in. So that the Arab Spring coming up as well. So that's just a brief overview about that. December 20th, 2017. We've jumped ahead 9 years now. This is when Saturn enters its own sign. Saturn is here. Saturn's come home. With him now is Pluto there. So 20th of December 2017, we have Saturn in the same house as Pluto. And they're making aspects to Uranus. So it's at this point now where we find Pluto starts to build its strength, because Saturn is there with him and he says, okay, I'm home now. I can give you exactly what you want. Let's talk about what you want. So the process started then in terms of where we are now at the moment. Then on the 3rd of December 2019, Jupiter. We go back again. I keep forgetting to press Control. Jupiter here. Jupiter enters Capricorn. Saturn and Pluto have moved over to here. And there's Jupiter. Now, Jupiter, up until now, had been sailing through his own house, his own sign of Sagittarius. So all of this Saturn-Plutonian energy sitting there in Capricorn has kind of been offset by Jupiter in Sagittarius, in his own house, because Jupiter's benevolent and lovely, and he's in his own house. He can do whatever he wants to do. So he's a very happy bunny. So Saturn's in his own house, and he can do what he needs to do. But as soon as Jupiter enters Saturn's house here of Capricorn, Jupiter is subject to Saturn. So Jupiter says, I want to expand things, please. I've had a lovely time in Sagittarius. I've had all sorts of freedom, and life's been lovely, and I've been able to travel wherever I want to go and do whatever I want to do and spend whatever I want to spend. So I want to expand wherever we are now. And Saturn says, yeah, okay, let's, and Pluto together says, okay, we're going to expand some chaos. We're going to expand some problems and some issues and some difficulties. And Pan then jumps in and says, I've got a good idea, because right now his Uranus just entered Taurus, which I would say is the nature sign. It's about earthiness. It's getting our fingers dirty and practical things and down to earth. And they say, well, let's turn to nature now. Let's see what we can do. Let's have some natural disasters. Lots of astrologers said it's going to be a natural disaster, all of this. Other astrologers said it was going to be a war. But the fact that Uranus was there suggests something thought of natural. And we didn't know what was coming then, did we? And that's the beginning, as you'll probably recognize, when China first started to experience the COVID virus, almost exactly to the day of Jupiter entering the sign of Capricorn. Then on the 26th of December 2019, we had a solar eclipse in Capricorn. So you can see now we have from here the sun, the moon, Jupiter. That's a node. Ignore that for now. I won't talk about that. It is important, but that's the south node, not an easy one. That's Saturn, and there's Pluto. All of them in Capricorn, every single one. And it's a solar eclipse, the beginning of a new cycle. This magnifies everything that's going on. Now, in addition to that, those of you who know a bit about the asteroids, Ceres was also in Capricorn. And all of those planets are making aspects by house to Eris, that was in Aries here, and Juno, that was in Libra here. And then there's other asteroids that are making aspects as well. I haven't put them in because they're not often talked about outside of astrology things, but they have an impact of what's happening. Huge stellium of planets in here. And Mercury is about to go in there as well. This is absolutely huge at this point in time, and it gets huger. Can you have huger? I don't know. 12th of January 2020, Pluto, Saturn, Mercury, and the Sun are all conjunct within a degree of each other. Pluto, Saturn, Mercury, the Sun. And in there as well, just slightly off there, but still in the same sign and the same house, is Jupiter. All of those planetary energies are all coming together to create something global and huge and unavoidable, whether it be personal to us or collectively. And this is the point where the virus starts to leave China and starts to infect other countries and people in other countries. What's interesting here is if these are what's called aspects in the center, all these lines are aspects. But you can see there's only one other aspect or one planet aspected outside of these, and that's Mars aspecting the moon. Nothing else is aspecting other than all of these planets at the top here. It's just an astonishing event. It really is. Then on the 16th of February, just to liven things up a bit, Mars enters Aquarius. Sorry, Capricorn. Mars enters Capricorn now. So if things weren't lively enough yet, in comes Mars, and Mars says, I want a bit of warfare here. I want to start getting things going. I want to make some action here. 16th of February, that's when things start happening in Italy, and people start and countries start going into lockdown, cutting and severing contact with each other, and it escalates even more. You're getting a flavor here. Mars is also enshrined to Uranus in Taurus. So the unpredictability of Uranus, the desire to fight something and make something happen with Mars, Capricorn and Taurus, both earth signs, both related to achievement and nature, and it all kicks off even more. But we haven't finished yet, because on the 22nd of March, Saturn enters Aquarius and Mars enters Aquarius. Jupiter has an exact conjunction with Pluto and the Pluto South Node on the 5th of April. Now, you might think, hurrah, Saturn's out of Capricorn and Mars is out of Capricorn. But remember that Aquarius is still ruled by Saturn. It's also joint ruled in modern astrology by our friend Uranus down here. So no way are we out of the woods. The energy will change. It maybe become more social. Maybe we'll start looking at ways of reforming ourselves. How do we change society? Which is what happened. We're talking about lockdowns and you can't go out anymore. It's actually restricting our freedoms. But we accept it and we understand why it's happening and what's going on. And there's Jupiter and there's Pluto. Jupiter is magnifying everything yet again. And we've still not finished, because Venus then turns retrograde in Gemini, squared to Neptune in Pisces just a week ago, 13th of May. So all of these planets are still going on up here. You can see a lot of the planets have gone, but there's Pluto and Jupiter still in Capricorn. There's Saturn still in Aquarius. And now we have Venus up here in Gemini going retrograde, square Neptune in Pisces. Neptune in Pisces is very, very powerful. And Neptune in Pisces represents that floatiness of dreams, ideals, hopes. But Venus is and beauty, what we hope will happen. But Venus has turned retrograde now, so it becomes, in a sense, almost too difficult to see and understand what's happening and what's going on. And Mercury has also just entered Gemini as well. Here's Mercury down here. So with Venus retrograde there, Mercury is in its own sign now of Gemini. Mercury rules Gemini, and they're squaring by sign Neptune. there's every possibility that we are beginning to act inappropriately. We are beginning to see some hope that may be false hope. It may be a dream. It may be an idea that's just before its time. And of course, this is the time, exactly the time where we're now starting to come out of the most severe lockdown. Some countries are coming out of it completely. And I have to wonder whether we're acting on something that we hope is true as opposed to something that is actually true. With Gemini, with Venus and Mercury in Gemini and square that Neptune, it's also a wonderful time for people to spin us lies and half-truths and falsities that we're very, very happy to accept because we don't want to face up to what's happening and what's going on. And this is today. This is actually 10 minutes ago now. So we just talked about, so this is the planets as they are at this very moment. And you'll notice here, well, I'll show you. The sun has just entered Gemini as well. Mercury and retrograde Venus are just coming up to conjunct, and they are still square with Neptune. We're still in that same energy. At this very moment, the moon and Uranus are absolutely conjunct within a degree of each other, almost to the minute, actually. It's what, about 10 minutes apart they are. So you have this dreamlike quality of the moon conjunct with the rebellion of Uranus. And we still have our friends up here, Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn, all in Saturn signs. And you'll also note that if they're in red, these planets are, where you see a red sign, planets are going retrograde. So we have Saturn turning back on itself, because you think this is all over now, don't you? They're all going to turn around now. Saturn is retrograde here. Jupiter's retrograde here. Pluto's retrograde here. And Venus is retrograde just there. Now, Mars is going to turn retrograde soon too, by the way, just to add a little bit of spice into it in case there wasn't enough. So that's where we are now. That's what's been going on in the heavens this year and a little while before. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second and open up everybody's mics, and we can have a little chat about it.
Woohoo! We can say things.
You can. I can't unmute you, Donna, because you've muted yourself.
I was being helpful.
Oh, that's very kind of you. So, any questions? Anything that's not clear? There's an awful lot there, I know. I've rushed through something that could take a whole day, but I just wanted to give you a flavour of how huge what's going on up there is and how the planets are reflecting what's going on. I could go back. I could start talking about previous conjunctions. Well, I'll just briefly tell you this. So Saturn, Pluto. The last time Saturn and Pluto were conjunct was October the 5th, 1914 and May 20th, 1915, First World War.
Yeah.
These are conjunctions. This doesn't include the oppositions because there's other things going on there as well. August the 11th, 1947, which the Americans turn around and say it's about the rebuilding of Europe. But if in this country, you probably associate it with the Israel-Palestine independence war and the India-Pakistan partition, which were huge and really awful. The next one after that was November 8th, 1982, which in the middle of the HIV situation. If you look at oppositions, February 17th to December 13th, 1931, that was the Great Depression. April 23rd, 65 to February 66, which I think is around the Cold War and the Vietnam War and stuff like that, if I remember rightly. So yeah, so you get the picture. If I talk about Saturn-Pluto conjunctions as well, then 1918 flu pandemic, 1981 HIV again. There was a plague in Russia in 1771. Then we have to go back a little way to the 1346 Black Death. And there was a plague, a huge plague in Athens in 430 BCE. All of those at that same, those things.
Wow.
So there's history here. So, is there anything anyone would like to ask, or have I completely bamboozled the lot of you?
Right, looking forward to the next instalment.
No, all of that.
You do.
No questions?
It's just mind blowing. Absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of dumbfounded. Just
You're
incredible.
dumbfounded.
A little bit, yeah.
Not following.
Headed back to where they were now.
They're heading back to it. Yeah. Well, I'll show you that now, if you like. Shall I press on?
Yeah.
Because you think at the moment, you think, oh well, okay, at least we're over the way. This is horrible. This is the worst it's ever been in that I can remember in my life. It's certainly in my lifetime, so it must be in yours. But at least it's over. Ha 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 ha. Okay, let me share my screen. I know there's a button here somewhere to mute everybody, but I can't bloody find it.
I'll do mine.
We need to mute ourselves then.
I'll get to you in a second. Oh, you've done it anyway. Okay, right. So moving on. Still to come tonight. Not tonight. On June the 21st, there is a solar eclipse in Cancer. Solar eclipses are always big things. Solar eclipses occur when you've got these funny little symbols that I talked about on the nodes. Whenever the sun and moon are on top of these nodes, these are the moon's nodes. North node, south node. Oh, bollocks. Excuse my French, I keep it in the wrong. So you can see there that they're on top of each other, sun, moon, and Mercury for that matter. I'm waving bye-bye to someone who has to go early.
I'm unmuting because are we supposed to be seeing your screen?
Yeah, are you not seeing it?
No.
Oh, let me try again.
No, there was no screen. Sorry. We could see you, but not the screen.
Share. Let's try
There
again. Can you see it now?
I can see it now.
You
I'll
can see
unmute again.
Okay, thank you. How weird. Let's try again. I'll show you again. These are the nodes. Come on, press the button. Work. That's the nodes. North node, south node. You don't want a technical description of what it is. They're to do with the moon. Just leave it at that. And whenever the sun and the moon are together near the nodes, there is an eclipse. So this is a big eclipse here because it's within a degree of the sun and the moon together. June 21st. Eclipses are always big deals. They're the start of a new cycle again. So new moon eclipse. This is the last time we'll get an eclipse in the current Cancer Capricorn axis. So all of the eclipses we've been having for the last 2 years, 18 months, have all occurred in Cancer and Capricorn. And we're about, as you can see here, the nodes are about to move into Gemini. So in future, they'll be on the Gemini Sagittarius axis, which is going to change the feel of our everyday lives. And without going into too much detail, I think it's going to be a change from a recognition of home and of big business to one of faith and of ideas. And that's a very quick summary of what I think the nodes are going to result in. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think we're going to see that shift along with everything else that's happening. So this solar eclipse here happens at the same time as there's a Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunction, albeit loose and out of sign up here. They're still within 5 or 6 degrees, which is easily close enough for them to affect each other. And they're all still in Saturn-ruled houses. And they're sextile our friend Neptune, which is there. And Neptune is now conjunct Mars. So there's an element of wanting to take action now. Now, Mars in Pisces, this is Pisces here, isn't that comfortable, to be honest. So it might result in actions that are totally inappropriate. It might result in actions that really aren't that effective either. But there's almost certainly going to be something going on around June the 21st on midsummer, exactly on the solstice. There's other aspects going on there, but those will do for now. So you can see that's where we go next. And there's still more. Mars enters Aries on June the 28th. I haven't got it on there. This is already moved in there. So Mars enters its rulership on May the 28th. It becomes very, very, very powerful at that point. Saturn, which we talked about was going back to where they were, will be moving back into Capricorn. There he is there. So he stations retrograde in Aquarius and then moves back into Capricorn. And then Mars stations retrograde on the 9th of September. So we're going through quite a long time now where things don't really change that much from where we are now until September. But it retrogrades in Aries on the 9th of September, and it will square the ongoing Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, Capricorn conjunction in Capricorn, which is huge. Again, really volatile. Don't know what's going to happen. Could be big. Could be very big. And Mars usually whizzes through Aries. Mars, like Venus, usually whizzes through signs. But Venus is going to spend, earlier on we were talking about Venus in Gemini. Venus is going to be in Gemini until the end of June, which is really unusual, and will continue to square Neptune all the way through that. So to the end of June, you've got this nebulous quality going on in our world at the moment, and that'll continue. So maybe more lies, maybe more deception, or maybe just more confusion and the fact that people don't really know what's happening. But then Mars stations retrograde. Stations means it stops in this, or appears to stop in the sky and then turns backward. And then, which means Mars is then going to take a long time in Aries, which it very rarely does as well. So Mars is going to be really, really powerful in Aries. It finally turns direct on the 14th of November, just as Pluto and Jupiter have that final conjunction together. Then on the 21st of December, the next big conjunction, we're still not through it yet. Here's Pluto still there. It's still going to be sitting in Capricorn till I think about 2024. So we've got that for a long, long time. Now, Saturn has moved back into Aquarius and Jupiter has joined it. So Saturn and Jupiter have now conjunct in Aquarius, while Pluto squares Mars. Oh joy. Happy days. Pluto and Mars can't get much more volatile than that. Pluto in its own, and Mars in its own sign. It's a big deal. You've got this, the Sun and Mercury are also conjunct here, but you know, they move very quickly, so we won't worry about them. So Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. This is a 20-year cycle, and it often sets the tone for new orders and a new order of things. So I guess we could think that it's a change in, because Saturn is now in Aquarius, it's that change of form from the Capricornian structures to how do we change things. It's going to change our forms of governance or government in one way, shape or another, our forms, our structures, our society. It may raise all sorts of ethical questions about how we use computer technology and artificial intelligence, but it also might hold the issues of how our governments are able to track us and follow us and so on, because Jupiter wants to expand, Saturn wants to have structure. So in theory, if you say that, it's about expansion of structures, expansions of authority. But it is in Aquarius, which wants freedom. So maybe that expansion will say we need to expand the limits that we are being faced with at the moment. So maybe it changes into a mainstream interest in more spiritual matters, more spiritual issues collectively. May also mean that the collective becomes more important than the individual. So if we have to go back to Boris Johnson's, what was it, herd immunity, get as many people infected as we possibly can, and if a few million die, then, you know, la-di-da, the rest are okay. That's kind of what that could mean, but it might be deliberate, it might be a fact of life, but it might be something far more positive. I'm kind of saying what it could be. So I'm actually getting towards the end now, so it's not been quite as long as I thought it might be. And it may just teach us to look to the stars and to the heavens more and trust in the gods, the old gods, and change the whole way we view nature in the world. It could be as simple as that, saying we need to completely change how we're dealing with nature, because I haven't mentioned this recently, but there's our friend Uranus still, and he's still there in Taurus, and he's gone retrograde as well, by the way. So he's still sitting there, and he'll be there for a very long time. And he's saying we need to revolutionize what we're doing with the Earth. We need to change what we're doing with the Earth. We can't carry on the way we're doing it, and we need to change it. These are all really long-term planets here, apart from Mars, which comes in and gives it a kick, or Venus, which says, oh, let's go all floaty. But this is long-term stuff. So these are really dramatic planetary alignments, and we already know there's great intensity and changes going on, and they'll carry on. They'll keep going. They do have a destructive edge. There's no getting away from that. But we've got to work collectively, I believe, to make sure that that destruction turns into something positive as opposed to something which is more restrictive. Change is never a smooth process. But maybe we'll see new solutions and new paradigms come out of this. A promise of rebirth and new visions that gradually unfold into 2021 and beyond. So let's just move on a little bit more. Beyond, where do we go from here? So Pluto moves between Capricorn and Aquarius from March to 20. So Pluto stays in Capricorn until March 2023. Or it stays in Capricorn and Aquarius. It bounces between the two because Pluto will go retrograde as well. So that'll be bouncing between, and here it is there. It's going to go bouncing between these two signs, between Capricorn and Aquarius, but it finally leaves Capricorn in November 2024. So we've got our Lord of the Underworld sitting there in Capricorn until November 2024. He moves into Aquarius, which changes the theme. And at that time as well, Saturn leaves Aquarius and moves into Pisces. Be much, much softer, completely different energy now. Saturn won't be very happy there. Saturn in Pisces, it's, you know, a beautifully watery, ethereal side, and there's Saturn saying, I want structure. So if you can make a square out of water, then be my guest. So Saturn's going to struggle there, which is frankly good, in my opinion. So it's a question of how we use this time positively. So before I give you my views, there are a couple more slides. I'll share this one and then I'll leave the last one till later. This is kind of Aquarian. It's impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Epictetus, ancient Greek. And Epictetus again, happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control and some things are not. It is only after you've faced up to this fundamental rule and learned to distinguish between what you can and can't control that inner tranquility and outer effectiveness become possible. So with that thought, I'm going to stop sharing the screen And if you'd like to unmute yourselves, or I will unmute you all. And I'd love to hear your views.
I'm going to write all the dates in the calendar and wait and see what stuff hits on those days, basically.
Yes.
Sounds terribly exciting to me. I must admit that we've got the chance. I think I would say that we've got the chance if we all think right and if we all hold the right vibe. We've got the chance to actually affect change. Because the fact that every thought we have kind of gets magnified out there like ripples of the water. As long as we're seeing it as positive, then that will force the positivity within this very fluid structure that we seem to find ourselves in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Anybody else want to say something? Are you all stunned?
Yes.
So what fascinates me is how exactly those planetary aspects are following what's happening across the globe. I mean,
Today. Yeah.
you could take that more deeply, and you could look at the charts of the US and the UK, and then you probably get an even more accurate feeling, because that's just a global chart. But the whole globe is affected by all of this. And it's really interesting that during all of these things, we've noticed, and I think it was Donna said the other day, that China is rising all the way through this. As the West grows less influential, you're getting the effect of the East, not just China as well. I mean, Korea and all of these other places are becoming far more influential in our lives. So there's that shift that's going on as well. And who knows where that's going to play out, how that's going to play out. But spiritually, in that sense, I think there's huge opportunities here if we're prepared to grasp them, but we have to accept responsibility for our own actions. And that's kind of the message of Saturn. We have to accept our own authority, or resign ourselves to the authority of people we may not agree with, and so on. And I promised I wouldn't get too political, but at this point I have to say that we've kind of voted for this when we voted Boris Johnson in. And we voted for Conservative governments for what, 3 parliaments now or something? I don't know, beyond that, goodness knows how long, since Tony Blair got thrown out. And that was that part of that 2008, 2009, when Pluto started moving into Capricorn, we turned to more authoritarian governments. Now, I'm not saying Tony Blair was sweetness and light, because he was a dick, frankly, but he, at least there was a sense of social responsibility, maybe not as much as I would want. But then I'm a rabid Green Party member, so you know, cards on the table there. But we voted for the world we've got, and America has voted for the world it's got, and all that angst over there is exactly the same as we're going through. And while all this is going on as well, we've had Brexit. And I haven't mentioned Brexit, but Brexit's in there as well, in terms of what's happening there. About we want to isolate ourselves. Every country at the moment is going through that, but we're the only country that's actually said, oh, well, okay, let's isolate ourselves from our nearest neighbours. That's a good idea. But we're the only country that's done that. And it's all reflected there in the charts, all of it. I've just picked out the main ones. There's loads more. But I've talked, and I think we should hear from a few more people.
Well, I'm a natural optimist. Go on, Annie, say something. You move forward.
It's all too highbrow for me.
Highbrow.
It's
I
not
like
hype.
pictures.
No, I'm not really bothered to look at the charts of present day. I just do people.
Yeah.
So it's been. I knew that you're talking about all the way through. It was just an eye opener. It was worldwide. More than anything, I actually understood what he was saying.
We go back and look at all those dates now and check all the charts out. I can't help but be positive, though. It's in my nature to be incredibly optimistic. Some people might call me daft about that, but for me, we're riding a wave of change, which is a spiritual one. Maybe I just hear the good news, but I see more and more people out there saying, I like the cleaner air, I like the sound of birds, and people are looking out of the window and seeing what nature really is, because they can't go out there because they're being told to stay in. So it's kind of having the opposite effect, where people are starting to look at what their life is really about. And if all this stuff is happening to the planet, what effect is all this having on us as individuals? We're part of the planet, we are the planet. So everything that's happening to her is happening within us. So we have the opportunity now, I believe, to actually open ourselves up spiritually, as the planet is opening up spiritually. And for me, that makes the future utterly wonderful and rosy. And this is a time of introspection, a time to stop and think about who we are and what we are. And the planet is saying, I don't want to stay like this any longer. I need to change. And we all know that. We all heard that loads of times. We know that the way we're living is not sustainable. Now we've got this chance to actually change for the better and have a completely new life, a new way of being. And we can force it on the government, because they're kind of, they're in a bit of a cleft state. Yeah, they keep talking about going back to normal. But I fully believe that people don't want to go back to the way things were, because it wasn't right, and they know it. And I believe now is a time when we can change the same way as the planet and everything. It's like we can tune into the stars, hear the stars within our heart, and just start growing ourselves. Yes.
I agree wholeheartedly. I agree wholeheartedly with that choice. But the point about, but that there is that point that it is our choice to do what we do. And those planets say, and all astrology is the same thing. You look at almost any astrology, there's the shadow side of all the planets, there's the shadow side of all the aspects, and so on. So Jupiter can be wonderful and benevolent, but it all can be also can be completely obsessive. You know, Saturn can give us the structure to do our lives, but it can also completely limit us and stop us doing the things that we want to do. Mars can give us the courage to go out and do things, but it can also cause harm and hurt people and cause wars. So and so on. And Venus can be about complete self-delusion, as can Neptune, or it can be about love and beauty and bringing that into our lives. So every planet, every aspect, every sign has this dichotomy within it, and we have to make the choice. And if we don't actively as a society make the choice, then the negative aspects of Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter will be imposed upon us. So this is really, to me, this is really a sense of a need for rebellion. But how many of us are courageous enough to do that? This isn't going to be about being all twinkly and Venus-y rainbow unicorns and things like that. This is about getting out there and working with the Lord of the Underworld, the undercover secret agent of transformation. We have to take him on board and say, we are going to work with you, because he'll do whatever he wants to do. Pluto is completely and utterly unavoidable. And that's the one thing about Pluto. Saturn, yeah, you might be able to manage him a little bit, but everybody here's probably experienced a Saturn return and knows how difficult those can be, or sometimes how transforming those can be, depending on our attitude and what's happening and so on. Lord of the Underworld, Pluto, he's remorseless. And most people, not most people, a lot of people will never have a natal aspect to a transit of Pluto at all, because 240 odd years, you may never ever have an aspect to Pluto in your charts. Now, lucky old me, I have a sextile at the moment to my natal Saturn, a square to my natal Sun, and a trine to my natal Jupiter, all to Pluto right now. Happy days. So I'm really feeling this, really feeling this. And I've been feeling it for years, because ever since Pluto entered Saturn, these aspects are getting closer and closer and closer. So some of us will be going, I don't know what the fuss is about. And others will be going, geez, this is shit, you know? But I know
Yeah.
at the end of the shit, there's going to be something really worth having. But we've got to fight for it. So what's really interesting, I've made some notes here. Pluto burns away the conditioned voices of family and society that limit what's possible. We have this voice in us that our parents gave us saying, this is the limit of what you're capable of. This is all that you can do. You'll never be able to do that. Or why do you want to be this? Because it'll never work out and so on. Pluto burns that away completely. All of those limits are gone. But those limits in adulthood and in childhood, for that matter, we will experience that as a void or as grief because we've lost something that we think is precious to us. So if we say to our parents, no, I'm not doing that, that's really difficult. That's grief. But this point in time is a moment when we have to release things, and we must release them. Or otherwise Pluto will just take them away. The more we resist, the more painful the destruction will be. The more we want to cling on to the old ways of being, the more we want to say, no, I still want to fly everywhere. No, I still want to drive my car 100,000 miles a year. No, I still want to be able to have all of my shopping delivered and eat whatever I want and have fruit and vegetables all year round and not worry about what it's doing to the earth. Yeah, I still want my iPad. I don't care whether all the mining's destroying the world. I don't care if the rainforests are being destroyed. Then sooner or later, that Pluto energy will say, no, you can't have it anymore. So it begins with the disruption of the outer world. And we need to find, I think Donna was kind of touching on this, we need to find that Zen-like state of not knowing what's going to happen, but accepting what will happen will be based on what we do and what we decide. So we find that authenticity within us. So, I've said if the way I look at it is like this, an analogy for you. If we see a train leaving a station, the train's going out and we want to catch it, we can grab hold of the train on the outside, but we're not going to stop the train. So it's probably best to either get on the train on time or let go of the train. Otherwise, you're going to get dragged along and be in deep shit. And society, the current structures, the current structures are holding on to that train, and they have been for quite a long time now. I've seen the signs way back in 2007, 2008, and goodness knows what, where they know that the capitalist society that we have at the moment that relies on endless growth can't sustain itself, but they're too greedy to stop. They're holding on to that train. So we get on the train.
Like that cancer analogy, wasn't it? The only thing that has exponential growth is actually cancer, and of course eventually it just has to be cut out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's where Neptune comes in as well. So Neptune gives us the vision. Although I was saying that the Venus-Neptune thing gives us a bit of delusion there. Neptune is sitting there in Pisces, and it's a beautiful vision to have. So if we can integrate that Neptune visionary time, that helps us envision what we're looking for, that better society. So,
How do we start?
sorry, Annie.
I was just going to say, so how do we start? What do we do?
Well, that's up to you, my lovelies. I don't have all these answers. But what I do know is if we are true to ourselves, if we invoke gratitude, if we accept that Pluto destroys the old restrictions and limits of Saturn, and we demand a new story that Jupiter thrives on, then we can start to expand and grow something new that's important. So it's about relationship. We've talked about relationship before, haven't we, in nearly all of my courses, where we build relationship with these forces, whatever you want to call them, whether they're archetypes or gods or planets or whatever. We need to invoke gratitude for what we have, praise gratitude, and work with it and handle the hard lessons so that we can create something new. We don't blame or shame. We acknowledge what we believe in, and work with that. So I don't know, if we're riding a bareback horse and we get thrown off, but we believe we should be, we need to ride that bareback horse to get where we go to. We get back on the horse. We don't just say, no, I'm not doing that again because that hurt, because it will hurt. Some of this will hurt. So
it's really about I think we've got to tune into our guides, and we've got to make sure we're looking after our spiritual self, because if we, just thinking about things that we can do practically, just make sure that we do meditate every day and connect to those that are working with us in our spiritual path. Be aware that our life might need to change, because it's very difficult to do that, especially come at a weird time, because I was in the middle of thinking about whether or not I was supposed to move, started making all sorts of plans towards it. We were looking at houses, boom, all of a sudden this has happened, and we're stuck here, and we've had to do a whole rethinking of life. So it could just be that in lots of ways, spiritually, I found that quite good, because my head is no longer taken up with moving. I'm now taken up with what I'm supposed to be doing in my life as, on my own path. So I found it very, very helpful to be in this kind of lockdown state. And I think it's looking for the silver lining in every situation, for listening to our guides, for being in that place where you're open to what is coming into you. And just thinking about what Annie said and just coming up with something practical. I mean, it's something we have to do as individuals, but maybe we can find a way of perhaps meeting up, using moon energy. I don't know, you know more about this sort of stuff, but using the energies that are there to actually send love into the world. I've had a big thing. One of my guides sort of said to me not so long, at the beginning of lockdown, said to me that I had to work with love, peace, and understanding, which is why I made myself a bracelet. Love is represented by rose quartz, peace is represented by amethyst, and the aquamarine is there as a kind of representation of the understanding of the sort of way we communicate, the way we reach out to people. And I've worked with those three now throughout the whole of the virus, and I found those three words have been really, really helpful. And I just keep spreading them out there, sending out love, sending out peace, sending out understanding. Makes me feel I'm doing something at a time when you can't really do much, but just sending out a prayer that you feel is useful is just putting all the good stuff out there into the universe, and it does get picked up, those ripples. So that's a practical thing I would suggest we do, and maybe we could do it as a more collective thing, but that's up to folk.
Yeah, I'm every day when I get up and when I go to bed, I always do a small ritual and ceremony. And even if that ceremony is lying in bed and saying a few prayers and lighting a candle and so on. But I do the same as you, effectively. I use almost certainly use different words and so on, but it's always about sending out love and peace and beauty and positivity to manifest positive change, really. One of the last things I've written on some notes here is I've said, now is the beginning of a time of reckoning for all who hold power and authority. They will kick and howl and pull ever tighter on the reins, but in the end, there can only be the irresistible magic of awakening and change. So we create the magic by positive intention and relationship and getting together. If we can get together, great. I don't know how practical that's going to be, but I'm all for it. I'm up for it. It's something that maybe we can change if we share, if we've got Facebook page, if we come together and think about how we can make that happen and do that. It's interesting you talk about the moon. You didn't mention the moon, didn't you? Yeah, working with the moon. But of course, the phases of the moon is exactly what's happening with these planets. We see it, so the dance of the sun and the moon, when it goes from the dark moon, and then we move that through that seeding phase, and it grows to it's a quarter moon, and then it gets to the full moon stage, and then it goes back down into the waning quarter, and then it goes back down into the dark moon. That's what these planets are doing. These huge planetary cycles, they're doing exactly the same thing with each other. So what you see in the sky and what you feel with the moon is exactly what we're doing with Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter over massive timescales. That's the only difference, massive timescales. And we happen to have chosen to manifest in this world at this point in time. We chose to be here for this, I truly believe we chose to be here for this. It might be shit or it might feel like shit, but we have an opportunity here to create something quite amazing. And we blew it in 2008. We had the opportunity then, but we blew it. We all turned into the security side. Oh, no, I want to save my money, and I want to save my house, and I want to save my job. And I'm saying we, I'm talking about the government and everything else. When I say we personally, I'm talking about we collectively. But we have another opportunity now. And I think you're right, Donna, that people are noticing the difference in nature and noticing the difference in the quality of life as well. I just hope they hold on to those reins themselves and say, we want it to stay like this.
It's quite a brave time as well to be able to look inside yourself and have the time and the peace to understand what you are at the moment as well.
Yeah.
And where you are.
Yeah.
In all this too.
Yeah. It's a time to go in and say, what do I truly believe in? What do I truly want to manifest in my life and for nature, for the world?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are struggling with that because that's quite scary, isn't it, for some?
It will be. Yeah, it will be. I understand that. But we are, again, I think Donna said this, we are the shining lights. We're under fire as well because we're the shining lights of all of this, and we have been all the way through. So the forces that are resisting this have got us in their sights. So we have to be extra vigilant about that. We have to choose whether we want to be in their sights and play a part in this, or we say, oh, no, it's too difficult. And that's my worry. So Donna being Donna's always positive, and Donna's always positive, and I'm like, oh, I got Saturn in my first house. Oh, I'm not sure about that. So
I live with someone with Pluto on the ascendant. It's a nightmare.
Oh, Bobby, my God. Okay.
Pluto conjunct the ascendant.
Nice. I know someone else with that as well. Yes. Oh, well. Okay. Jonathan and Sarah, you've been very quiet.
Taking it all in.
Okay.
And, just the thing about, people rebuilding their lives or not going back to the way they were. The problem is that they don't like the fact that we don't buy into all the commercialism and the, sort of like the way they built their house on sand, really. So, it's trying to wake people up to the idea that actually money is a means of exchange and not the be all and end all of everything. And actually, you can restructure your life, but people have got this illusion that they have to have loads and loads of money to be happy, and actually it's that's what they come on accept, and they're very scared of it.
They are. Yeah, they are. No one's pretending this is easy. No one's pretending this is easy, but
and of course, from the perspective of Saturn is, as you say, the planet of business. And what we are seeing is very probably what should have happened a long time ago being enforced on Saturn.
Yep.
The office blocks are empty. There is nobody there. They are all working from home. And how many of those companies are going to have it kind of, oh, we've got an entire building that we don't need. And we don't need to have people troll up and down the motorways and clutter up all the roads, burn vast quantities of gasoline, and thunder up and down on the public transport. Because actually the company functions perfectly well without any of that. And it just costs money. You have to pay people more, and you have to provide a big building for them to be in, which costs you a fortune. Yes, it's a great, big, very phallic status symbol to have your skyscraper, but this is one of those things. There will probably be a touch of they either have to surrender that, or it will get taken away from them, because those who don't adapt will die.
Completely true. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's the Saturn and Jupiter conjunct in Aquarius, the very first degree of Aquarius as well. It's the minute they enter there, and that makes it really very powerful. And that's the adaptation there to new ways of working, isn't it? So Aquarius is about technology as well, and all of these other things that I didn't talk about. You know, using modern technology and working remotely, and using Zoom meetings and goodness knows what. That's exactly Aquarius all the way through. So that's something that we can see happening, as long as people.
Sorry, there was something I saw on, I think, BBC somewhere, where I don't know where the statistics come from, but in view of what Jonathan was saying, people are realizing they don't need to be in the office now, and that they can work from home. Therefore, they don't need to live near the town anymore, and they're thinking about moving out to the country. So there is a possibility of a great diaspora of people, everybody using technology. And then we get zapped by the sunspot, and what happens then? Sorry, that's by the by. But the idea
Donna, you just said something negative.
I know, but I think if we don't get this right, if we don't get this right, we'll get the sunspot.
Yes.
Sure of it.
No, you're right. Well, we've already had coronavirus, and
Yes.
And we know that the virus is already adapting and mutating and so on. And we've had the shots across the bow in the past. I mean, this is the biggest shot we've had yet. It's almost a case of change or go away the way of the dinosaurs. I really feel it's kind of that point now. And we might survive this one, but we know that there'll be another one because of the way we exist at the moment and the way we're decimating nature and treating the creatures and the forests and so on. There'll be another one, and it won't stop. It's not going to stop now, and I think they'll get more and more frequent. Anyway, that's enough of that. Really, we don't want to talk about that anymore. We want to make it positive. But this is our final shot. To me, it feels like this is our final shot across the bow. The fact that planets are moving into Aquarius eventually, because this is long term. We're talking about 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe even 100 years for this to go. If we're still here in 100 years. You know, this cycle, as I said to you, the last time these planets were together was 1894 BCE, 4,000 years ago. So this is truly momentous, and we probably won't even see the end of it in our lifetimes. Well, maybe one or two of you will, but some of us wrinklies won't anyway. So, yeah. Well, I hope it's opened your eyes to how amazing, frankly, that astrology is, and work, because I work with them as gods. I don't work with them as archetypes or anything like that. To me, they're the emissaries of the gods, and it's a great shame you don't know what the Celts, because the Celts would have had their own astrology, but of course that's long gone. We only have the Hellenistic and going back to the Middle East and so on. But it's just a fascinating thing, and I've only just started the last couple of years, so this is all very new to me, and I'm learning. And this is the first time I've delved into this. Is called mundane astrology, by the way. When you start working with that's what it's called. Global issues is called mundane astrology. That's what it's called. Mundane, everyday, ordinary. You know, this is ordinary life. It's not it is usually pretty mundane, actually, but this particular few years,
it's spectacular.
It's very spectacular. The good news is, once we're out of this, things do get a bit better and change enormously, change rapidly. Yeah. And we've got to make sure it changes for the better for the planet and for spirituality and ourselves. I'm going to share one. Is there anything else anyone wants to say before I share the very last slide I have?
I'd like to say thank you so much for enlightening us. It's been amazing. Thank you, Vic. It's been fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming and listening, because I'd be sitting and talking to myself otherwise, like I was on Sunday. Which was hilarious.
It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If anybody wants natal charts, I do them for £150 each. No, I don't. No, I don't. But I do natal charts, but I'm just very slow at them. I take ages.
At that price, I want to choose where my planets were.
There are astrologers. There are astrologers on the web that charge $250 for a reading, and it's like, really, seriously? Anyway, they do. Let me share the one last slide. This is just a parting comment, really. Let me share this with you. Something deep in the human soul awakens as things fall apart. Something in the soul knows that everything in this world can become lost, and something in the soul knows how to survive periods of devastation, disorientation, and loss. Descent and falling is the way of the soul from its beginning. We each fell from the womb of life when the waters of the inner sea broke, and it came time for us to breathe on our own.
Very nice.
And the card, some of you may recognize the Thoth card of the Queen of Pentacles, which represents the symbol of Capricorn. Capricorn is also represented by the devil. So we have the two choices. Do we go with the devil, or do we go with the amazing beauty of the Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Coins, overlooking a beautiful fertile valley, holding the world in her hands with the goat balanced? It's our choice. Okay.
And on that note.
And on that note, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Go and get yourself a cup of tea or coffee or whatever.
This is where I hit the applause button. There you go. I don't know what that does, but you know, it's an
it brings up a little hand.
Oh.
Can I do that? I don't know. I can do that. I probably can. Oh, reactions. Here we go. There we go.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening. Talk soon.
Lovely to see you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll leave. There we go.